T.B.photo X1.5TFX and welcome back to another video. Well, this is a little bit of a flea market bargain. I was out with some friends and family on a couple of flea markets a couple of weeks back, or rather it was last weekend, and what we managed to find was that, me and my dad went around on some flea markets. He's a former hi-fi salesman. And we looked, he had some, a flea market. I think it was a Goodwill or a Red Cross, it doesn't matter. They had some, what was it? It was Pioneer gear that was very good for its time and still holds up quite well. And it was, cheap and so on, but we looked around a bit. And then my mother calls in and says, "Tobias, have you seen the display case over there with some camera gear?" So I went over and thought, well, I'll give it a shot and just take a look. And I flinched really when I saw one of the items for sale. So I thought, I asked the clerk that, I want to see that. Can I see it? Okay, thank you. And I started to play around with it, trying to keep my excitement at a minimum. But anyway, I just said, I need this. I'll get this. So 400 Swedish kroner later, which is about 39 euros or $42. I have it on my cheat sheet here that I have the conversions from Forex. But anyway, 400 Swedish, 39 euros, $42 or 33 British pounds. And what did that get me? This, a Nikon EM, Echo Martin, or whatever you want to call it, SLR camera for 400 Swedish for $42. I mean, this, I thought, nice little toy, nice little camera. So I got this home and started to fiddle a little bit with it, and put a few new batteries in it and so on. I started to say, well, what kind of camera was this, and is this, and how was it, a little backstory about this camera. But first, the technical specification. It's the Nikon EM, and this was made for a fairly short interval. It was made between 1979 to 1982. It features a Seiko MFC-E shutter, or focal plane shutter. I have this on my cheat sheet here because it's a little bit of, too much to have in your mind, just so everything has to go in a bit of a pace here. So anyway, it has a shutter speed that can go from 1 to 1,000th of a second, plus bulb mode. It has a flash sync speed of 1/90th of a second, which is fairly decent, I would say. But here's the thing. This camera is aperture priority only. It's the only way this can take photos, aperture priority only, which is one thing that made that many people shied away from it when this was current, or when this was new, I should say. But it also features a built-in light meter with a 60/40 center-weighted metering mode. Yeah, you have a matchstick meter on the left side of the viewfinder that will actually show you what shutter speed the camera will use, so you can do a little bit of control over that. So yeah, match needle shows the shutter speed between 1/1000th to 1 second. Mechanism, manual cocking lever here, compatible, and underneath it's compatible with a Nikon MDE motor drive that will make this camera take 2 frames a second. But you have, the gilded connection points here, you have the battery hatch, tripod mount. This little silver button here is the clutch release for the winding mechanism, and then you have the winder here. Up top, not much, everything you need, nothing you don't, really. You have, the ISO selector that goes between 25 to 1600. You have a battery check. If you push this little button, a red little LED is illuminated back here. You have the aforementioned cocking lever, and you have the shutter release with threaded adapter, so you can use a cable release for this. And then you have the shutter mode selector, which is, you know, now it's in auto. You can put it in M90, which is the flash sync, and bulb when you do the shutter release. Front of the camera, you have the self timer lever that you just push down, and you press the shutter release, and it will count down a timer for you. On the other side, you have the lens release button, and you have a, what should we call this? This is kind of a check button for the light meter. But that's basically it. On top also you have a hot shoe viewfinder, little slit here if you want to put in, you know, the card that says what type of film and ISO you have in the camera. Pull up the rewind knob in order to open the back. See here, the plate for the film, the take up spool here, and how here you put your 35mm, and the shutter. Yeah, but anyway, this for Nikon, the EM, was basically a failure. But that's a little bit strange, because if you listen to some older photographers on YouTube, like Jared Pohl and Matt Granger, Zach Aries, and a host of other, you know, photographers, and also old camera collector photographers like Pavel Goya and Mujanju, and Travis Mort from Forest Hill Film Labs. I mean, those guys talks a lot about vintage cameras, and even Jared Pollan talks about his stash, I mean, vintage collection of 70s Playboy magazines. Yeah, whatever. He talks about that he likes those magazines because of the camera advertising in them. And in the 70s, it was actually quite the hot topic that cameras were supposed to get smaller and compacter, but still being full SLR cameras. But compact cameras really came into their own in that decade. But this camera kind of failed anyway. Well, one thing that made this fail was that it was aperture priority only. That was a little bit of a misjudgment by Nikon, because if they just made this camera a little bit bigger, they would have been able to put, you know, a shutter speed dial right here with the, you know, the ability to click between, you know, automatic shutter speed, which would make it aperture priority, or manual shutter speeds. Since it only goes up to 1/1000th of a second, that wouldn't really be that much of an issue, in my opinion. So that's pretty much one of the ways that this camera bummed. And another way was that Nikon's marketing for this camera was, today we would call it a little bit non-PC, because this was a little bit sexist when it was marketed, because this was marketed to women, with the reason that it was simple, and that's why it was marketed to women. I mean, that for women, everything you need, nothing you don't, and you don't have to bother with shutter speeds and so on. So it became a snapshot camera in that aspect, and professionals and amateur professionals and connoisseurs, they shied away from it, from those, by those matters. But today, I mean, what would this be for today? Well, I know that a lot of people who do street photography, they talk about, you know, they like their rangefinders. Doesn't matter what, I mean, I have a video from before when I talk about my view on rangefinders, that I don't really am that impressed with them. But that being said, I have to just say one word: Leica, and that means that I know that rangefinder have their place and that they're great, but I prefer SLRs, and that's just me. But anyway, this camera for me would be a great street photography camera, because I stole the leather strap from one of my other SLRs that is a little bit bigger, because I thought it would, you know, work good on this camera. So having this when you're just out on the town, you want a film camera with you, and you want to just take a snapshot on whatever, this would be very nice. And when it comes to, you know, size difference, for instance, I have another camera here that I've shown before, the Zenit TTL. This Russian-made camera. If you look at it, it's not much. It's not wider. It's just as wide as the Nikon EM, but when it comes to, you know, the height of it, I would say that not really. They're fairly same dimensions, but this one feels much more chunky for some reason. It feels taller, and it's a little bit taller, but if you can see, like so, it's not that much taller. Yeah, so you have a little bit of a reference there. And another camera that I would say, this one, the Praktica Super TL, which I took the leather strap from. I mean, this one is a bit bigger, it's wider, and it's taller. You can see this one is probably a 50s or 60s type camera, but with a pretty much a lot bigger pentaprism in it. But as you can see, the EM is smaller. It feels small in your hands, and I have small hands. So this one feels a bit small, but you can see here how these two other M42 cameras work. But these two are fully manual, while this is aperture priority only. This and both of these go up to 1/500th of a second, so this can take out one more f-stop of light. But anyway, these are still great cameras, but chunky. This little outgrowth here for the shutter release, it's an acquired taste. And the Zenit, also full manual. Other thing, this has 1/90th of a shutter speed when it comes to flash sync. Zenit TTL 1/30th. But if we're going to take it this compared to another Nikon, I can't do the D7200 because that's the one that films this. But anyway, how about the F801? This I've shown in some other videos, but you can see here the size comparison to these two. That's the, and I'll just remove the lenses so you can see. I mean, yeah, these cameras are, you can see the pedigree coming between them, but this one doesn't have the red stripe that Giugiaro put into the F3, I would remember, if I remember correct, which this is kind of more in the ballpark of. The F801 is a much more professional camera, but what should we say? Even though this is a more professional camera, it is heavier and it's a little bit more bulky, because if I wanted to go out on the town, I would actually have this little thing. But anyway, great camera, great in all ways, but now we go to what also caught my eye when I saw this, because of the lens that sat on it. This lens have been, you know, loved by many contemporary photographers. It's the Nikon, not Nikkor, Nikon. What is it called? Nikon lens Series E, the 50mm f1.8. This lens is a underappreciated classic. And if you don't take my word for it, here's a controversial internet photographer guy who likes to review any type of photography gear, Ken Rockwell. I mean, this guy is a bit of a controversial person, I know. But what Ken actually says about this, and this is a quote from his website, "The Series E is a refuge from the 1970s that few people likes, but it's great." And also another controversial photographer that also talks very much in favor of this lens, because his words, yes, it's a budget lens, but it's budget from 1970s standards. And that's another Ken, it's Ken Wheeler, the angry photographer. Yes, I know, I like to watch his videos, love him or hate him, but he seems to know his stuff about camera gear. Anyway, this little lens was produced between 1979 to 1985 as a budget alternative. It takes 52mm filters and it has a minimum focus distance of 0.6 meters or 6 decimeters or 60 centimeters, which is quite impressive. It has a 7-blade aperture and it goes from 1.8 to 22. And it also is compatible with the Nikon HR4 folding rubber lens hood. And some people say that this is the small compact pancake lens almost. It's great. It's a brilliant little lens and it works great with this camera, and I've also taken some shots with a D7200 in this lens, which would make it into a, let's see now, 50 divided by 2 is 25, 25 plus 50 is 50, 60, 75. So a 75mm equivalent. So yeah, so having a small DSLR like this, small SLR like this, excuse me, for street photography, I think that's a little bit fun actually. So yeah, street photography, that's what I would use this camera for. Street or 35mm landscape photography. So in that aspect, I like it with this little 50mm. It's a great little camera. And also, here's a top tip for you. If you want to lower the shutter speed on this camera, for whatever reason, you can always use ND filters or any type of filter on this in order to fool the the light meter in it, because it doesn't have any exposure compensation. You don't have this on this camera. But anyway, this is Tobias Bergstrom from T.B.photo X1.5 to FX, and I would like to see you guys in the next video. And as always, please like, comment, and share and subscribe. Anyway, also, falling into peer pressure, get a Patreon, they said. It will be fun, they'll say. Just announce it, they'll say. Okay, I've recently gotten a Patreon, so link in the description. No pressure, no nothing, just for fun. So anyway, take care from now on, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, bye.
I took these pictures on K2, world's second highest mountain. I was the first woman to climb that high. My professional Nikon and I made history. I'm Diane Roberts. This year, a new Nikon is making history. The new light compact Nikon EM. A Nikon anyone can afford and simple enough for anyone to use. Just focus. The Nikon EM is practically foolproof. If it's too dark or too light, it beeps. Then just turn this ring till it stops and get the picture. If I want a rapid sequence, just add this motor drive. History making, but that's Nikon. The new Nikon EM. Affordable and practically foolproof.
Why just buy a camera when you can buy a Nikon?